Hello, my name is Molly Horrigan. This is my final project presentation for Class 734, Obesity Epidemiology, about the association between the consumption of sugar-sweetened beverages and obesity in New York State. Obesity is defined as having a body mass index, or BMI, of greater than 30.0 kilograms per meter squared, as defined by the United States Department of Health and Human Services. Obesity is highly associated with other, more severe comorbidities, such as cardiovascular disease, diabetes, metabolic syndrome, and adverse cardiac events such as myocardial infarction, stroke, and hypertension. Increased consumption of sugar, especially in liquid form, is associated with a higher risk for developing obesity and its corresponding comorbidities. In fact, every extra 10 ounces of sugar-sweetened beverages consumed greatly increases a person's likelihood of developing obesity. In New York City, a sugar-sweetened beverage tax was introduced in 2006. This added a 4-cent tax per every calorie for sugar-sweetened beverages, including sodas and sweetened fruit drinks, which significantly decreased the consumption of these beverages by 35% from 2007 to 2013. Other studies conclude a 0.4 kilogram reduction in body fat percentage due to this sugar tax. To analyze this association, I performed a statistical regression of BMI and weekly sugar-sweetened beverage consumption in the state of New York in 2016. Data from the Behavioral Risk Factor Surveillance System, or BREFIS, was used to analyze the relationship between BMI and the amount of sugar-sweetened beverages consumed weekly. BREFIS is a national telephone survey that collects data on more than 400,000 adults nationwide in the United States every year. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, or the CDC, conducts this survey to gather information on important health informatics to improve public health policy that promotes healthy activities. Since the inception of this survey in 1984, research has shown that individual health behaviors and activities have a great impact on an individual's morbidity and mortality, such as the consumption of sugar-sweetened beverages. For the analysis, the 2016 dataset was cut down to include only participants from New York State. Variables that were analyzed include BMI and amount of sugar-sweetened beverages consumed per week. Confounders include sex, age, ethnicity, race, education level, income level, physical activity in the last 30 days, history of cardiovascular disease, and history of diabetes. Data was cleaned by running regression models for each variable and confounder. Complex survey weighting was used for the BREFIS data set, and therefore a new variable needed to be generated in order to avoid the miscalculation of missing values for variables. A binary indicator variable was created, called include, and each variable that had any missing data was set to a value of 0. For this analysis, persons with BMI less than 18.5 or underweight, BMI greater than 40 or morbidly obese, or missing BMI were not included because of the research question being answered, which was the association between sugar-sweetened beverage consumption and BMI of overweight and obese persons. The BREFIS dataset included 2 different variables for the consumption of sugar-sweetened beverages, or SSBs, which is sodas and fruit drinks. These 2 variables were combined into one and then categorized based on the number consumed weekly. A new variable was also generated because the BREFIS dataset recorded the number of beverages consumed daily. The new variable was categorical and separated into categories such as 0 SSBs per week, 0 to 1 SSBs per week, 1 to 7 SSBs per week, and greater than 7 SSBs per week. Confounders that were analyzed included sex, age, education, income level, race, ethnicity, physical activity, history of CVD, and history of diabetes. For all of these confounding variables, any missing values were set to include equal 0. Certain variables from the BREFIS survey were disregarded or combined into one variable. For example, in the original BREFIS survey, persons were asked if they have ever had a heart attack, ever been diagnosed with heart disease, or ever had a stroke. All 3 of these survey questions were combined into one category for analysis, the history of cardiovascular disease, or CVD. The same is true for history of diabetes. After this data cleaning process, the final dataset was reduced down from 34,190 New York State residents to 22,572 persons who did not have missing data for any of the confounding variables, for the outcome BMI or for the exposure of interest, which is SSBs consumed per week. Both descriptive statistics and regression models were analyzed for all the variables based on the BMI categories. Statistical data analysis software, or STATA version 15.1, was used to analyze the data. Descriptive statistics for the outcome variable and each confounding variable were analyzed for each category of BMI, for normal, overweight, and obese. Based on this subset of the breakfast survey, nearly 2/3 of the New York State population consume at least one SSB per week. A higher proportion of normal weight women responded to the survey questions, whereas a higher proportion of overweight and obese men responded to the survey questions. Nearly a quarter of the Black population that responded to this survey is obese. Being less educated is associated with a higher risk of developing obesity, which is supported by other research studies. The same is true for lower income levels. Obviously, being less physically active is more positively associated with risks of being overweight or obese. Having either CVD or diabetes, or both, is positively associated with overweight and obesity. Note, none of these confounding variables are direct causations of overweight and obesity. They are simply associated with a higher BMI level. Before adjusting for the confounding variables, the only category that presented with significant correlation between SSB consumption and high BMI were persons who consumed over 7 SSBs per week. After adjusting for the confounding variables, persons who consumed 0 to 1 SSBs per week and more than 7 SSBs per week were more likely to be overweight or obese. Note, this does not mean that SSB consumption leads to overweight or obesity. It simply means that persons who consume these beverages are also overweight or obese. This is also true for females, the Hispanic population, persons with diabetes, persons who have not had any physical activity in the last 30 days, less educated persons, and Black persons and/or persons of other minority races. It is important to note that BMI calculations for older persons becomes less and less accurate as we age because of loss of muscle mass and bone density. The linear regression showed that persons with diabetes are more likely to be overweight or obese than persons with CVD. In order to analyze the relationship between the consumption of SSBs and a person's BMI level, a subset of the New York population from the 2016 breakfast dataset was analyzed. After running regression models and crude analysis, the data suggests that persons who consume more than 7 SSBs per week are more likely to be obese. This is not a direct relationship, it is simply a correlation between body anthropometrics and sugar-sweetened beverage consumption. Further research needs to be conducted surrounding the direct effects of these sugar-sweetened beverages on comorbidities associated with obesity and overweight, such as CVD, diabetes, physical inactivity, and more. The confounding variables that influence these positive associations are Hispanic ethnicity, racial minorities, gender, history of diabetes, less education, and less physical activity. Based on this statistical analysis, I would like to propose a research intervention that implements nutritional education for children in urban, multi-ethnic schools. Emphasizing the importance of healthy eating and drinking at an early age can help reduce the adult obesity rates. This is especially true for Hispanic children, children of racial minority groups, and children with family histories of diabetes. Specifically, this research would involve weekly nutritional classes or seminars for 5th and 6th graders for a full school year. Teachers and public health educators could help run these weekly seminars. Alongside the healthy eating and drinking education, the children involved in this study would also create weekly food journals to track their food and beverage consumption throughout the year. The aim of this study would be to improve dietary patterns of children at an impactful age, 12 and 13 years old, so that they carry these healthy eating patterns over into adulthood. This would help address the current obesity epidemic seen in the adult population, as evidenced by the 2016 breakfast dataset that we analyzed. Thank you for listening. Here are my references. Thank you.